War Drum Bat Rips, The Sins of War.
Welcome to War Drum Bat Rips. I'm Ross, you know me. So, we're going to have a little chat. Decided that we could do this. I haven't done one of these sit down, like talking head videos before, so I'm just going to spitball some ideas and see where we go from here. I want to talk about the state of 40k. I want to talk about how 40k makes me feel now and how it made me feel before. I want to talk about where I want the game to go and how I think the game needs to get better. I want to talk about it in comparison to other game systems, and I want to have just a little generalization of my feelings on the subject. So to start, how did I get into 40k? Well, I remember when I was 13 years old going to a game club where I predominantly played Magic the Gathering and maybe a few board games, but never ever played war games. And when I arrived one night, no one was there to play Magic. From a group of 10 of us, everyone had cancelled, and I was there on my own. So the guy who ran the club took pity on me and decided, you know what, I'll invite him along to see if he wants to play. So he said, do you want to come help me run my army for tonight? And I was like, yeah, that was awesome. He was playing guard, and he was up against, I think it was Nids. And for the first time, I was a little bit apprehensive because I wasn't sure what I was doing. But after we got into the swing of things and I was told, about different bits and bobs and how it all worked, I started rolling some dice. And you know what? For the first time in my life, dice actually mattered. It felt epic. It felt like there's models on the line. I'd played Snakes and Ladders, I'd played Monopoly, but it never felt the way it felt rolling those dice when there was little models on the line. And that, for me, changed something in me. It made me feel like I wanted to do this, and I did. I went. I got a starter set. My uncle bought me it. We played. I painted. I played. I wasn't great back then. I took painting off for many years and came back to it recently. But the problem was, I didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't spend a lot. But the guys at the club were really helpful and gave me stuff. Were really supportive. And we don't use this anymore, so here, have this. It was great. I still have some of my Ultramarines from back in the day. Now flash forward, 25 years to me being near enough an old man now. Do I still feel the same way rolling dice as I did when I was 13 years old? If I'm honest, no. 40k right now for me, it doesn't feel epic. It doesn't feel like a game system that makes me go, yes, I want to get up and play every single day. I do most days play or do something 40k related, however, or Warhammer related. However, I don't enjoy playing 9th as much as I enjoy playing other editions. I've played all the way since 3rd, and I've enjoyed it most of the way through. A lot of people say 7th was the most bloated edition, and it was really hard to play, it was really hard to teach, and it was really complicated. Well, sorry 7th, but it's time for you to step aside as the most bloated edition and the most complicated to play and teach, because 9th is there now. For me, 9th edition is far too complicated, it's far too bloated, there's far too much to do, there's far too many things that can go wrong in it. It, for me, is a very bloated edition. That's fine. It's great. We're getting very close to 10th ed anyway. However, I'm worried about that too. I was on a podcast recently with Tabletop Assault. Shout out to my boys. Biggest problem with the idea of 10th is where they're going with rules writing. Now, I know there's been a couple of backtracks and stuff with the job thing they posted, and people have not, people have kind of given feedback, and the candidates apparently weren't good enough. I don't know if that's a response to them realizing they made a mistake with pushing for a tournament player to make rules or not, but that doesn't matter. What mainly matters is I'm worried about 10th, because if they go down the competitive route the way they've been going down for 9th, it makes me scared that they're going to make another edition that's very much not fun to play. This edition is built for competitive mindsets, mostly completely built for that. It is built to very much benefit the person who goes first. If you go first, I'd say it's somewhere in the region of 8 to 10 times you win the game. Now that shouldn't be the case. There shouldn't be that much of an impact of you going first. Now that for me means there's something wrong with the system. If the person going first all the time is winning most of the time, then that's a problem. It should be at least 50-50. There should be a slight advantage, maybe 60-40, maybe, but there should be a slight advantage to going first. But it shouldn't be the predominant reason you're winning the game. If you're a skillful player and your dice rolls are really lucky, that's a completely different kettle of fish. But if you're winning mainly because you've wiped out half their army on turn 1, that's a problem. Now that's a problem with the system, not the rules. Recently, we've been playing a lot of AOS, we've been playing a lot of Underworlds. And in my spare time in the background, I've been playing Battletech and I've been playing Legion. These are alternate turn systems. These are fantastic. They do what they're supposed to do. You each get a shot, you each do things, you each have fun. 40k for me feels like the person who goes first has a lot of fun. Some cases it doesn't happen, but most of the time the person who goes first has a severely damaging effect on the person playing on the opposite side of the field. And the person on that side of the field isn't having any fun. And to be honest, myself, I don't enjoy that aspect. I played against a friend of mine at the club that I go to on a Thursday night. And he is an old school player. He's been playing since Rogue Trader. Hasn't played a lot of Ninth. He's played a few games. But he said to me, Ross, I know you've got some mean lists. I want you to run the meanest list you can think of against me. And I did. He asked me not to hold back. He asked me just to go hammer and tong at him. And I did. I went at him. And by the end of my turn 2, I went first. By the end of my turn 2, he had 2 Chaos Cultists left on the field. I shouldn't be able to do that to a player. Whether I'm using Mortarion in my Death Guard or not, I should not be able to put a player who had 2,000 points of models on the field down to 2 models left by the end of turn 2. Now, I grant you, my dice rolls were exemplary, and the triple Plague Burst Crawler and triple Mephitic Blight Haulers and Mortarion help a lot, but he had a Kaitan and at least, 24 Berserkers and a lot of Cultists. I should not be able to reduce someone's army to 2 models in the space of 2 turns. It shouldn't happen. But it did, sadly. And I felt bad. I didn't enjoy it. It was horrible to be a part of it. And, I felt bad. I shouldn't feel bad because of a game system. Now, I feel it's very much indicative to the fact that I went first and all my stuff got to go first. I feel like 40k as an alternative turn system might be a way to improve it. But again, that's the kind of like nitty-gritty minutiae of the game. That probably won't change. What can change, however, and we'll go into that, is the fact that the bloat that happens at the moment, the bloat that's going on right now, can change. So the amount of books that are required, the amount of FAQs that are required, the amount of erratas that are required, the amount of things that they do wrong, that can change. That can be improved upon, that can be bettered. So for Codex wise, I don't think that there needs to be as much. I think there needs to be a centralized core rulebook with universal special rules. There are multiple variants of a Feel No Pain in 9th edition. I think someone tallied it up the other week, and it's like 65 or something different versions of a Feel No Pain. That used to just be called Feel No Pain. It staggers me that you can't just have Feel No Pain, but there has to be it has to have a different name. It has to sound different. It doesn't. It's a Feel No Pain. Just leave it at that. Invols, like Fearless, stuff like that. I mean, there has to be an improvement on how this is packaged and sold. Now, for me, there needs to be a core rule book with core stratagems that everyone has access to, not just the 3. There has to be a clutch of maybe 20 to 30 core stratagems that every army has access to. Maybe not 20 or 30. Maybe 15 to 20 core stratagems that every single army has access to, and we can all use it. Very much similar to the AOS kind of like hero fades abilities that everyone has access to, that everyone can use and everyone can do. And yes, there should be specialized stratagems for each army. We'll come to that in a second, but I think that should be the main bit. There should be one rule book that every single rule that is used in game is applied to every single army, apart from special rules for your chapters and your army specialists and stuff like that. So like Eldar have their own thing, the Dark Elder have their own thing, the like Ynnari have their own thing. There has to be a differentiation, I grant you, but it should only be like one or two things, and that should be that. Now, what your codexes should be after you having your core rulebook with your core stratagems is there should be all your different types of stuff you can take in your, like, the different houses you can take in, like, Eldar or Knights, or the different chapters you can take for Space Marines. And each of those chapters, or each of those, like, specialist houses and stuff like that, they can each take their own type of special rules or special detachments, and they'll have their own special stratagems that only work for them. It would severely reduce the amount of books that we have to have. We have one core rule book that has everything in it for everyone, that we work off that one book, and then we have codexes to specialize in the armies that we want to utilize. Now, these are, again, it shouldn't be super expensive to do. It shouldn't be costing 30 to 40 quid for a book. It shouldn't be. I know prices are going up and I know things are costing more, but if you cost it more appropriately, more people will buy instead of trying to pirate. It's just the way it works. If it's cheaper, more people will generally buy it. So it's more accessible to everyone. That's the way I think it needs to go forward. I think there needs to be general kind of like a complete overhaul of the system and the way the codexes are done. Now, I want that to be the way going forward, but whether it happens or not is a different kettle of fish. Now, I feel like for me, 40k is in a state of flux right now, because we don't know where the system's going to go. We don't know how it's going to cope with 3D printing. We don't know how it's going to cope going forward in the next few years. I've heard people talking that right now they're just trying to focus on making as much money as they can before 3D printing becomes an issue. I'm not sure how true that is, but I can see it. Predominantly as a business, they want to make money. Who can blame them? Companies like making money. However, for me right now, I feel like they need to focus on appealing to their core audience. Now, that was the other thing with the system that I feel is wrong with 9th, is the fact that it's far too competitive. The narrative stuff they gave us with Crusade, I'm sorry, but it isn't good enough. The system wasn't great. No one ever plays it. It's really, really bad. In a nutshell. Not saying there are no aspects of Crusade that aren't fun. That's not what I'm saying. There are some of it, but it just got bogged down in the nitty gritty, and it just became a task. It wasn't fun like the old school Necromunda systems used to be. It wasn't as epic. It wasn't as fun. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. Now, I've said for a very, very long time that I feel that 40k needs to have like another way of playing. Like, narrative is narrative, but you still use matchplay rules, but your army lists are slightly different. Then there's matchplay, and matchplay is very, very much a competitive format. And Crusade wasn't good enough. Now, for me, it needs to be a case of there needs to be narrative, which basically the rules are completely kind of like, fluffy. You do what you want, run the list you want, have fun, do it. But the way it is kind of just now. There are match play, which is your generalized play that everybody wants to play with. That is just nominally great fun. You can have a bit of a laugh with it. If you don't want to take it super seriously, you don't have to take it super seriously, but the options are there if you do. And then there needs to be a competitive format. The competitive format is solely used for tournament systems, and if you really want to be a tournament player, or you really want to play competitive on your own, like on your YouTube channel or with your friends, if you and your friends are really competitive people and you want to play the competitive edition, go for it. But that should be written by tournament players. That should be their ideas. That should be the way they put forward. The narrative and match play systems should be put together by more narrative based and casual players. So it's because, if you look at the way I see it anyway, maybe I'm wrong, but the way I look at it is, when you look at the competitive system and the way the 40k fandom works, it's like an iceberg. You know, the pinnacle at the top of the iceberg is all your competitive players, and that's a very small percentage of those people. And then underneath that, you've got your kind of mid-ranged, kind of like, they want to be competitive players, but they don't really want to make that jump. They like to go to occasional tournaments, but they do it casually. It's like team tournaments and stuff they don't take seriously. Kind of like myself. I like going to team tournaments and having a laugh. I quite happily aim for the wooden spoon because it's a good giggle. I now have 2 in my collection. I would like to go for a third this year at some point if I can. And then you go further down, you've got your people who just play match play and just have fun. They're not hyper competitive players. They're not people who go out of their way to be difficult. They are pretty much just the average Joe who loves the lore, who loves the game, who loves just to roll some dice and have fun with their friends. And then the biggest part of it is your narrative players underneath. And they kind of mix in with those kind of casual match play players as well. The narrative bunch, there's so many of them. People who just enjoy painting, who enjoy the lore, who enjoy the system. There are people who just go out of their way to make their own rules, make their own way of playing it, campaigns and stuff like that. You know, those players for me, the casual kind of match play players and the narrative players make up the biggest part of this hobby. So if we are aiming our specific amount of rule creation at the top of that iceberg, then it's only hitting the very small amount. And I'd go as far as to say maybe 10% of the actual play group of 40k is competitive players, like hyper competitive players. Your casual competitive players, they don't go in depth for rules, so they wouldn't really care if it was a little bit fluffier. So going forward, when they put up that job art application for a tournament-based player, like that had tournament knowledge and was competitively minded, it really sent shivers down my spine to me going, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry, but that's not, for me, that's not what we want. What we want is we want an actual system where we can actually play and have fun. We don't want it to go ninth, we're already moaning about ninth. Ninth's already too competitive. Ninth's already not what the narrative and the casual players want. It's already got to the point where we are not getting, the boxes are not being ticked for us, so we are already worried about it. So if you're going forward with that, you're going to cause massive issues. So I think going forward there needs to be a bigger focus on the narrative way of playing, the casual way of playing. If you want to have a competitive edition of 40k, that's fine. Go sell a competitive edition of 40k. Have its own like set of stuff, have its own bits and bobs, and have its own little bells and whistles, and have the competitive players play the way they want to play. That is fine. And people will say, oh yeah, that's match play. Well, match play, not necessarily, because match play can still be fluffy, but the rules are a bit more stringent than narrative, and you know, sometimes that's good and makes really fun battles. Because sometimes you wouldn't have, 20 odd, aggressor units in a squad in an army, because it just wouldn't make sense. 3 of them would be a decent limit. You wouldn't have more than that in a specialist army, like a specialist bit of an army. You wouldn't. Sometimes you can make sense fluff wise why there's only so many of them. Why there's not 10 relic dreadnoughts running around the field beating people up, because you just wouldn't have that many relic dreadnoughts in the one area. It makes sense. 3 might even be pushing it. However, narrative takes away the rule of 3, and you can be a bit more casual about certain things. But I think narrative and narrative play and open play are, well, I think narrative play is open play, but match play are fairly similar in aspects, apart from there's some loosey goosey bits on the rules. It's not as hard and fast on certain things like the CP and stuff like that. It's a little bit different. However, that is in essence the same system, just with a few kind of ticks off that change certain things, and that's fine for me. But maybe if there was the match play was just the general rule structure, and then the competitive system augmented that with reduction of CP, the way it kind of is now with Nephilim, the starting with 6 CP and having to pay for a warlord trait, having to pay for a relic and sort of that sort of aspect. You're starting with less CP, and that's great. That's fun if you want to play it that way. But I think that should be a sort of thing competitive books come out, and those competitive books change the system to make to respond to tournament aspects. Because when ninth came out, or eighth came out, to be fair, if we go back as far as eighth, I don't think most narrative and casual players had an issue with indexes and the way the system was run. It was more the competitive players that had an issue. And again, a lot of the stuff that's happened in ninth, like with your Armour of Contempt and that sort of aspect, it's more competitive players and their viewpoint on how it breaks the game for them winning tournaments, as opposed to the narrative and casual players going, wait a minute, I don't like this. It's causing issues for me. You know, I'm not. Yeah, no. It's more of an adverse knee jerk reaction to, oh, we gave the Tau and the Eldar lots of -1 weapons, and the competitive kind of like meta is not happy with this at all. So actually, stuff it. We'll just shut it down, and that's that. We'll Armor Contempt, and then the -1 weapons don't matter, and everyone can go back to being happy. It was an overcorrection. I don't like Armor Contempt. I play 3 Space Marine armies and 2 Chaos Space Marine armies, and I don't like it. I think it's silly. I don't think it should be on everything. I think it's silly having it on anything but vehicles. I'm happy for it to be on vehicles, but I don't think it should be on infantry. But that's neither here nor there. It's something they've done. We can't change that now. It's there. But I hope going forward that they learn from these things and learn that it's not it's not the competitive players that make 40k. It's not competitive players that, I mean, if you even go down to the fact of YouTube channels, there are a niche group of competitive minded 40k channels. The biggest percentage of them play Matchplay, but it's in a narrative way. Liam Dempsey, Winter's SEO, Mini Wargaming to a certain extent, they're all channels that utilize Matchplay, but in narrative settings and using narrative weight. And I think for the biggest percentage of games, that is how most people run it. They are Matchplay players who play in a narrative mindset, and I think that is your biggest draw. Play people who buy 40k and play 40k, and I think that is an issue. They're not appealing to their market. They're not appealing to the people who can actually bring them the biggest money. And when you're only appealing to 10% of your market, your numbers are going to start to dwindle eventually, because people are not going to want to play it. In fact, they'll buy the models and they'll just buy the books. I would love to see the sales on the books. I don't know if it's easy to find. I would love to see the sales numbers for the books that they sold, to see if those things work in. But I've been rambling for 20 minutes now. I'm aware of that. And some of you will be watching still, some of you won't be watching still, and that's fine. I'd love to hear you guys, your take on it. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'd love to comment down below and, hit me up. Like final thoughts on the subject. I feel like 40k for me isn't as epic as it used to be. I've played lots of Age of Sigmar recently, and, I spent years. I mean, like, first edition of Age of Sigmar was a joke. Well, let's be honest, it was a bit mental. If you had a beard, you got rerolls. If you bowed to certain things, it was mental. If you Skaven could roll a 13, and they could, it was madness. But this newest edition, the third edition of it, is a very tight and concise and well structured system, and I think it's really, really well done. I like it. I think the biggest percentage of the problem with 40k could be addressed by adopting a little bit more of Age of Sigmar. The chances of maybe not the person who went first being second in the second turn going first again. It might be a kind of way of changing it up a little bit. The alternate fighting might be a way of changing it up a little bit. I know they've started to do that with the protracted combats, but I feel like it needs to go a little bit further. I definitely think they're making strides towards that, and I kind of hope with 10th they kind of just make the final jump, and the two systems kind of amalgamate a little bit in the rule structure and the way the hero phase and that sort of stuff works. It would be kind of nice. And that, like, with the command phases being at the same time, that could be really interesting. You go, I'll do this, I'll use it with this counter ability to do this sort of thing. Change it up a little bit. And for example, in Underworlds, I like Underworlds because Underworlds has a kind of like a reaction window where I can go, right, I'm going to do this, and actually say, no, I will do this in response to you doing that, and it'll either negate it or I'll get something just as cool. And that for me is another system that has gone way under the radar for me. I barely touched it for the whole time it was out, and I think it's now season 6, and I've only just started playing. And my God, have I missed out on that. That is one hell of a system. It is fantastically put together. It is fantastically well balanced. I know the battle report we just had on the channel, we were using some of the older rules for the orcs. I checked their errata, and their errata, it makes them so much more balanced. And I think that's the thing, they balanced that system so well, and the rules for that system are so well done. There's been very little kind of issue in the community from what I've seen with the way they're doing things, and I think there's less kickback and less fire. I'm not sure if that's because there's less people playing it, but if you haven't played Underworlds and you love like the lore behind like Sigmar, and you love there's not much lore in Sigmar, but it's getting there. If you love the kind of aesthetic of Sigmar and you love the way it plays, even if you like love kill team sort of like ideas, like skirmish games, I would highly recommend going and check it out. It's a very, very good system. It's very well balanced. It's very, very fun to play. It's quick to play as well. You can get a game done in like half an hour. You know, it's usually best of 3, but we just play one-offs, and it's literally like half an hour and you are done. Even filming them doesn't take that long. So, yeah, I would go check that out. And that for me has kind of got me to the point where I'm looking at this and going, do I want to play 40k predominantly as my main hobby? Well, the only reason that I do play 40k as much as I do is because it has such a draw on YouTube. 40k is the main content. That is where you get your most views and your most responses from, and that's fine. That's great. However, I feel myself more and more drawn towards Age of Sigmar and more drawn towards Underworlds. Underworlds for me has been a revelation, and I am absolutely loving playing it. It is so much fun. So yeah, that's a little rant from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys will give it a little listen and give some feedback, give some comments. It's just the ramblings of an old man who likes to chat about 40k and how it used to make him feel as a child. I know it was a bit nostalgic, but it did used to make me feel epic. You know, the moments that were you know, a little guardsman would take down a big vehicle and stuff like that. You know, or you know, it felt so much. The dice rolls just felt so much more epic. They felt like they mattered, and now they just don't. You know, the only dice roll for me that feels that matters is the roll off to see who goes first. And that's why it's in the videos now, is like in the 40k ones where it's like the roll off, the important part, because it is the important part, and only very, very occasionally does that roll off not matter, and that's sad for me. So on my final conclusion, I kind of hope that 40k going forward, like Games Workshop learn going forward, that there's more to life than competitive play. There's more to this game than than bloated rule books and like the same special rule printed 60 odd times that does the exact same thing just with certain different numbers. I kind of hope that they learn their lessons from 9th going into 10th. I hope they make a funner, more balanced, interactive way of playing. And I hope they learn from their other systems like Age of Sigmar and like Underworlds and stuff like that, and other systems that are out there like Battletech and Legion, and they give us the alternative turn system that we want and it's been crying out for, and that 40k would benefit from. If you haven't checked out our other video, we did actually do an alternative turn system video. I'll put the link down below and you guys can check it out, of how 40k benefits from having an alternating turn system. We did Legion, Battletech, and Bolt Action, and it worked out really cool. They were all very fun. I'll let you guys check that video out as well, and I will speak to you guys again soon. Take care and stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.
War Drum Bat Rips, The Sins of War.